got a monarchy today. It's gonna go quick.
Very quick. Public comment, seeing none. Meeting's over. We're done. We're good.
Have, 2 or 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our City Commission meeting. We're going to get started with roll call.
Mayor Brook.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah. Here. Commissioner Vignola. No. Commissioner Simmons. No. Vice Mayor Carter.
Present.
City Manager Goodrum.
Here.
City Attorney Hearn.
Here.
All right, great. Randall Cutter, if you'd come on up, Pastor, and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
With liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Sorry, there's no T-shirt for you, Randall. So I would ask everybody to stand and join me and the commission in a moment of silence in regards to anything on your mind that you'd like to give a moment of silence to. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are now at the point in our meeting for public comment. Deborah, are there any signed speakers?
No, Mayor. There
got
are no
nothing.
signed speakers at this time.
Okay. Would anybody from the public wish to be heard? Welcome. Seeing none, the public comment is complete, and we are now at City Commission Special Meeting Number 1, Ordinance 2019-116.
This is an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, amending Section 26-4 of the Code of the City of Coral Springs to adjust the calculation of equivalent residential units for certain residential properties, providing for conflict, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for a effective date. First reading was held July 17, 2019. On this, we had our public hearing. This is a request to approve and adopt at this time.
Okay, does anyone have any comments, questions? Hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Move in second. Discussion. Vice Mayor?
When we originally proposed this, in speaking with the business community in support of them, I had opposed it. It is my understanding that the people that I have since spoken to again are more understanding and now more in favor of it. And I haven't heard from anybody that asked me to hold my ground.
Sounds good. Any further discussion?
If I may add, I know originally most people were waiting on the fruits of the Broward County transit tax or transportation tax being added that everybody in Broward, not everybody, but a majority in Broward voted for. And so we were waiting to see if anything would yield from that to help us out with this. But since we have no idea when that's coming, and most likely will be coming maybe in 2 years, if that, we have to go ahead and make sure that we're prepared to take care of the city the best way we can as a commission.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
And we don't want to be the next Fort Lauderdale.
Now, this helps us be prepared for the future in a very financially prudent way. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Next is the presentation by Catherine Gibbons of the fiscal year 2019-2020 business plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, good evening, early evening.
And to you as well.
This is, you're seeing me again because we're talking about the budget again. And I say again so many times because this has very much been talked about and have been planned out now. We had our strategic planning sessions more than a year ago, and we've had our spring retreat where we talked about the 5-year forecast and what we're looking at some of the emerging issues, such as bringing in Broward County to talk about the surtax and the fact that it was not, some of those capital projects were not going to be able to be in the plan for 2020, and what does that look like, and what does that mean to our budget? So we had that conversation. We've had other conversations, budget workshops. At this point now, we are voting on setting the non-ad valorums as well as trim. So thank you again for letting me speak on budget items. So that being said, we'll just kind of go on we'll talk about the budget highlights.
Thank you.
And go into some of the influences and drivers into the 5-year forecast. Briefly look at the business plan initiatives and the impacts to the residents and businesses. So the 2020 budget is based off of our vision, serving with excellence, innovation, and integrity. The budget theme is innovative projects that lead to operational efficiency, public safety enhancements for staffing, and equipment, infrastructure, and drainage upgrades, grant opportunities, and investing in our future. So that's what you're going to be hearing about today. As always, we look at our service levels. I know that we've talked about service levels and performance management before, so anything that we are adding to, it's something that we will continue to measure. We measure things that we have been in existence for a while as well, and this is just my note to be able to, my plug to talk about service levels. That being said, let's get to the bottom line first, and that is, this is what we are proposing. We are proposing to maintain the current millage rate of 5.8732. The average single-family household will pay an additional $62 in taxes, not because you have increased millage, but because our property taxes are increasing. Voter-approved debt millage to slightly decrease. The fire assessment rates proposed on the different single-family from 200 to 227.82. The reason why we brought it down from the 228 is because we've had a GSG study, and at that point it slightly brought it down by a couple cents. Still, the same thought is to have single family and multifamily start to merge together to have the same assessment rate as many other Broward County cities do. And we'll be talking about that later, but that is what we're proposing for. The commercial slightly increases, industrial warehouse slightly decrease, and institutional, which really is for us, we increase. That's on us. So the residential solid waste assessment increased by 30, so it will go from 260 to 290 per single family household. Stormwater, we will be looking at setting that assessment, that monthly rate per ERU, $9.75 per ERU. If you're talking about annually, it's $117 per year per ERU.
And again, for the public, what is ERU?
The equivalent residential unit. And yes, the water rates will increase in one particular district by $2.40 per month for the average single-family home, as per a water and wastewater rate study back in 2013 had said to keep that up at 3.5% a year. This is the slide that says, what are some of the things that we're adding to Coral Springs this year? This is certainly not everything, but this is just kind of one of those quick hit slides that you can reference and the public can look at to say, oh, this is what's coming. So where does the money come from? Money comes when I say it generally comes from 3 different places. It comes from the ad valorem taxes, which amount to 46%. It comes from top 8 revenues. That comprises 30% of the general fund. And then charges for services and user fees. And then there is another category of other. So we'll kind of talk about those 3 areas right now briefly. The total taxable assessed values have been slowly increasing, and we are now to the place where we were pre-recession. If you look at that first number, it is pre-recession, so now we have recovered from that period of time back in 2008, now to have 8.76 billion for total taxable assessed value. When we talk about total taxable assessed value, we also talk about what's new and what has been redeveloped. So in this slide, you'll see the existing plus net new. In the middle, you'll see Broward County. They are at 6.87%, and we are slightly under that at 5.5%. The little orange tops are the net new pieces. So for Coral Springs, we had $67 million of net new or redevelopment in that category, and that is the difference of the 4.84% kind of below, and the Broward County average at 5.13%. Where do we get a lot of our ad valorem dollars? We're still in that ad valorem piece of the pie. 60 million is ad valorem, and 45.6% of that is by way of homeowners. So a lot of our presentations are geared toward homeowners because of that. And then businesses are very important to us as well for the commercial, industrial, and personal property side that comprises of 12.5 million of the 60 million. You can see the institutions down below and the new construction. So where do we sit with our operating millage? This is kind of a condensed version. You can kind of see other like cities like ours are right around that middle point. If you're wanting to see a more comprehensive Broward County list of all municipalities in Broward County, then you can see kind of at this point it moves us down on the scale to 19 of 31. All right, moving over to the next piece of that, where do the revenues come from?
Just making sure everybody's okay with the pace.
Yeah.
Good? All right, perfect. Thank you so much.
The top 8 taxes and revenues that we receive, the highest one being electric UST tax, and overall what you're seeing in this chart is the fact that it only increases by 1% annually. So this is going to become important while we're looking at, when we look at the 5-year forecast, to say, well, what are our revenues growing by, and what do we have control over versus what do we receive and have minimal control over. This is one of the minimal control pieces. Some of this is due to the economy, and some of this is due to different types of practices that happen, and we'll talk about that briefly a little bit later. But overall, our top 8 revenues, which comprise 30% of our revenues, only increase 1% annually. And if you're interested, all those people that are interested in numbers and where did I get that 1% from, this is the chart for you. That being said, I know I've presented this to you before. I'm going to go to the next slide. So what revenues do I watch? I watch all of them. However, do I expect everyone to watch all of them? No. The electric UST tax comprises about 9.5 million, and that is a revenue that is correlated to the market. So if the market is doing better, then you'll see that one climb. It also, when the market starts to go down, then that revenue typically goes down. I mentioned the 9.5 million in terms of this is the second highest revenue that we receive outside ad valorem. And you remember ad valorem was 60 million. So it's kind of a big jump to come down to the second. However, when you kind of categorize a number of them together, that's where you get the top 8.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Catherine, I just had a question. On the 10% utility service tax that payments made through the city, is that a state cap, or is that just
By
an
statute,
industry standard?
yes.
By statute, okay. Thank you.
The half-cent sales tax is another increasing revenue, and that is also tied with the economy. One that is not tied to the economy as much, but we've talked about is a declining revenue, is the communication services tax. This is the fact that landlines are no longer as prevalent as they used to be, and now the AT&T, all the different providers out there are now bundling, and it's a little bit different than practices of, let's say, 10 years ago. So when you buy your cell phone, then that is actually a sales tax item and not through communication services tax. So you'll see the revenue on another side, but just not on communication services tax. All right, the other piece of that, other piece of the pie are the charges for fees. And typically we see that as an average 3% growth in a year. This is one that we do have some control over. When we talk about the admin and user fees that we typically keep up with CPI, this is tied to that. So this is us trying to keep that mild increase going with a portion of the pie for this particular item. So for charges for fees, then that increase is, of the pie, that's 17%. That goes up 3%. Revenues. This is a great story right now. Our grant summary slide, we receive monies by way of grants. And you can see our 2018 total. We're very happy with the 1.1 million. We typically hit that 1 million mark every year since we hired in Kristen, our grant coordinator. So this year we're very happy with the number of 5 million to date. And clearly that is partially with the keeping up with what we always go out for funds, and I have to say that, or go out for grants, I have to put a very big thank you to many departments that encourage grants, and they do go out for them. They are hard, they're hard to keep up, maintain, and manage once you do have them, but we are doing a very good job at that, so.
Is the Power of Art included in this?
Yes, the Bloomberg grant is included in this, and the EDA recent $2.8 million grant, the award is included in this number.
We're happy to.
Great. This is a slide just to recognize that we do continue to look at our debt service on our existing bonds, whether it be GO bond and revenue bonds. As time moves on, you do typically see that number going down at that place. That's when you have some capacity perhaps for go out for additional for debt. As long as that number is increasingly somewhat going down over time, then that's what the rating agencies like to see. So some of the forecast assumptions that we have talked about going into the 5-year forecast are our revenues. At this point, we do continue to maintain a conservative approach. We are still receiving our state revenue numbers coming in, and we still have 2 outstanding. The BCPA total taxable assessed values is included. That's the July 1 numbers. On the expenditure side, we are concentrating on our cost growth, making sure that we keep our expenditure number less than our revenue number. As you can see, the 2.4 are our revenue figure, and the 2.3 number are the expenditures. We really looked at our one-time cost this year. So any of our capital, we really had the conversation of if it's a recurring item, this is something that it's going to become higher and higher over time. So if it is a one-time, then if we know we have that money coming in, then you can pay for it. So we've really kind of looked at that process this year, and I'm starting to become more disciplined on one-time costs. At that point, we can fund. However, on the recurring, that's the ones that, with everything, become very scrutinized. And as we have now heard, we've received no relief from the legislature in any of the items that they've asked us to do. We did not receive any additional revenue or appropriations for doing so.
Catherine, I just want to ask you about this one red arrow down, the slowdown for code liens and state revenues. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, as we're seeing with the foreclosure market, and now times are doing well, and those foreclosure markets, at one point, I think the height, we had 5,500 foreclosures in our town, and now we are under 500. I think we're under 200 now, in fact. So this number, when we receive code liens and fines, this number is now becoming smaller and smaller because more people are in compliance. So this is a number that we are seeing going down.
We don't mind seeing go down if they're more in compliance.
Correct. Again, just looking at the 5-year forecast trend, the expenditure growth is an area that we've really concentrated ourselves on. That 3% number is our city's mark to say, at that point, we need to keep our revenues or our expenditures under that number. So last year, we had our operational reset to say at that point, we need to make sure we really need to continue to keep that number down. And at this point, it's just being disciplined to keep that number down. We have looked at the revenue diversification that the rating agencies have encouraged us to do. You just passed that through on stormwater, so that is something that we are very, will be prepared for when our rating agency comes to say this is something that we have continued to try to strive and increase our revenue diversification on. So that will be a win when that comes in. The impact to the stakeholder, continuing our service levels. That's something that's been very important to us, very important to you, so you will see that in the budget, as well as continuing to meet our stabilization fund of 17%.
Yes.
Catherine, can you
Yes.
explain what's happening in fiscal year '23 and fiscal year '25, as far as the revenue going down and the expenditure increasing, and kind of how they're crossing over?
Yes, so if we're looking at this
Okay.
2023, 2024, I know it's small numbers to receive. When you see in '23, actually in '22, that is when we're looking at potentially having a small millage increase. And at that point, the following year, then that number will go down because at that point, it's leveled off. It's utilizing the existing that you have already said that you had received in from the year before. At that point, in 2024, that is another small millage increase. That's one thing that we had seen in our 5-year forecast, is the need to keep up with the market there. We can't possibly keep our expenditures, we're trying to keep them as low as possible, however, still to be able to be a 5-year and 10-year positive trajectory over 5 years, we do need to institute a series of small millage increases. And we also heard from the residents that they do not want to have one large millage increase, that the smaller incremental types along the way are better. So that's what we factored in. At this point, I will say this is our 5-year forecast. It is a lot of numbers on a page, and we had 2 weeks ago at our Business Plan 1 workshop, we kind of talked through some of the increases above 5%. So after that, at that point, then we submitted a memo to you all talking through those 5% justifications on each one of them. I've had conversations with each one of you, and at this point, I am going to pause and say, I think I have addressed all items on here. If there's anything that you want to speak about, now is the time on that.
Sure. Commissioner Sarah, any questions, comments?
Yes, Catherine, thank you very much. And I appreciate the thorough report that you gave based on the last workshop that we had. I do have a follow-up question, just because in an effort of transparency, when I look at the increases with the city manager's office and then also the information technology office, the city manager's office, when it comes to the reclassification of positions and additions, can you get a little bit more in detail with that? I mean, your report captured it, but I'm just trying to understand, like, was there a shift in positions from other departments that fell under this categorical, or were these new hires? Because the amount was around 590, and I'm just trying to...
Correct. All the above. So under the city manager's office, there are the offices of economic development, city clerk, communications and marketing, budget and strategy, a new department in emergency management that are all categorized into that one umbrella of city manager's office. So in communications and marketing, we had a part-time to full-time conversion. At that point, that adds a head count, and that differential goes to part of it. Then we also had in economic development, we added Christy Bartlett as the economic development director. That is another area where that increased. We transferred the emergency management division from police to city manager's office. So that added operating dollars as well as a head count. Then in my area of budget and strategy, there was a head count, partial head count in another department that we moved over into city manager's office. And last but not least is, last but not least was the move of the assistant city manager position from IT into that role. So that, at that point, it shifted the resources from IT over to over to city manager's office.
Okay. And I noticed when we're looking at the 5-year trajectory, when I look at the city manager's office line, you're looking at like 1 to 3% increases, which is common,
Yes.
based on. So I'm comfortable with that. The last question I have is around the report you gave was the R&M service contracts. This was something that was new. I know you talked a little bit about that at the workshop, but can you just
Sure.
expand a little bit more on that?
In IT, for this particular line item, as I say, with anything that we can have control over, we're trying to keep that number below 3%. Service contracts, these are items in the IT line that we have already been in a contract with. And in the industry of IT, whenever we do get into that, they're typically around 4 to 5% increases in their contractual escalators. So that's why that R&M number is higher. I will also say, when we purchase new software, those new items are purchased first out of the department's budget, and then they get transferred over to IT. So even though they don't they haven't brought them on, they do at that point maintain them. So it's all in one particular area. So that went up. The last area that I can say for IT, their R&M number going up is the fact that we're looking forward to having an ERP next year. So that is one of the numbers that we are just putting into place, that we'll be able to meet that going forward.
Okay, so when we're looking 5 years out, once again, that 4 to 5% increase is already embedded into the projection that you're providing?
Yes.
So, okay.
But I'll say this, and this is a point of internal conversation. Our IT department would tell you this number isn't large enough, and so, you know, that is one of the things I see as a challenge for us moving forward. You're seeing cities all over the place spending, you know, $500,000, spending large chunks of money. More importantly, having their services completely shut down. So this is an area to where just our vulnerabilities we need to invest more in. Our ERP is, it was end of life probably 5-6 years ago. So this is, I think, just a challenge for us, especially the market itself has changed to where a lot of it's the service contracts. You can't even procure things the way you could before. So it's something that these numbers were more of our best assumptions moving forward, but there's still a lot of work to be done, I think, as a city and all cities in controlling these costs moving forward.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I mean, obviously, every year, it doesn't get any cheaper.
Right.
So, but, you know, we have to be, like we had talked about at the workshop, mindful of the increases, and we had kind of set that threshold at the workshop of 5%. And I want to kind of keep an eye on that going forward, because when you look at a 14% increase, unless there's a real strong rationale around it, or there's a need for an immediate attention to something that just surfaced, I get it, but, you know, from a fiscal responsibility and also transparency with our residency, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about that. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sounds good. You
Thank
got
you.
it, Commissioner.
So I appreciate the email giving the breakdowns on the things we asked for. I don't know, and I apologize for being a little late here today. If we went over, I know there was a membership to a group that we were talking about and whether or not there was value in grants or anything on that. Did we get into that, or?
This is a good time. This point, when we looked at the grant opportunities that the city has or has not received from the U.S. Conference of Mayors, when we look back, we couldn't identify any grants that we had received. When we look at what that program is involved in, then the total dollar amount of grant opportunities out there for everybody in the U.S. to compete for is $320,000 per year. Most of the projects seem to be dollar-wise. Some are youth grants of $10,000, dollar-wise innovation grants $10,000, Better Cities for Pets $30,000, community grant program $150,000, and childhood obesity prevention grants at $120,000. So those are the grant opportunities comprising $320,000. Now, when I look at would our city meet any of these, and maybe the larger ones, at that point I have to think to myself, and just like any grant opportunity, I think We always would like to go for them. However, we look at, do we think we're going to get that or not? So when I look at some of the things on the childhood obesity, the larger items, childhood obesity, I don't think that's something that necessarily that we would necessarily win out for, given our current strategic plan right now. So the one topic that we have talked about and is possibly pulling that out, because if that particular initiative was to increase grants, then I'm not necessarily seeing that that would be the opportunity for us to be able to say, okay, then this is the grant opportunities that I think we would win.
Thank you.
So at this point, the consensus would be, having talked with each of you, is to pull that piece out and then on the $12,000 and dedicate that, because it seemed like consensus-wise from 2 weeks ago that you all have the combined interest to increase reserves. So my recommendation at this point, after hearing from each one of you and saying, okay, it doesn't seem like we have consensus to move forward on this, is to pull the $12,000 out and then to put it toward our reserves.
I think that sounds great.
Okay, beautiful.
So that sound okay with all five? Awesome.
Okay.
Great. Any
Oh,
further
sorry.
questions? All right, Commissioner Simmons.
Well, to kind of speak more broadly, I guess a year ago now or sometime when I was running for election and we were still in the much smaller historic space, City Hall of
Historic,
Coral
I like
Springs.
that.
You know, the commission before me had the hard task of increasing the millage rate. And at the time, as a candidate, it could have been much easier for me to just been like, down with the ship. But I actually kind of offered my own type of proposal, prior to the actual vote, and it was actually turned out in the same frame of mind that Mayor Skip Campbell was in, which was in an incremental millage increase. And so, what I want everyone to understand is that, we are future planning, and we are making sure that we are kind of cleaning up a lot of things that were not taken care of for years. And so when you look at these numbers and you see the millage increases and you see the different expenditure growths and all these different things that are changing a few years out and out and out, that just means that we really are planning for the future so that we really can avoid having to do something as difficult like that. And so also, please remember, we're all residents here too. So whenever we are voting for something that includes some type of increase, we are doing it to ourselves. But if that means making sure Coral Springs is the place it needs to be and a leader in this county, I am pretty sure every single last one of us will make that hard decision every single time. And so the last thing I'll say is this is also, I believe, the third time that we've seen I think the slides and the information. First it was on a one-on-one basis, then it was in a workshop, and now it's here. And so we've asked plenty of questions and continue to find more things to talk about. And that's just to let you all know that we aren't just sitting here because we aren't offering a lot of questions, that we aren't just sitting here like, yep, just eating it all up. No, we've asked, tons of questions, and we still have some, and I'm sure there'll be more today. So just wanted to kind of say that and get that out there so people understand. Thank you, Catherine.
I appreciate that, Commissioner.
Sorry if I
Good
stole your
job.
thunder, Mayor.
No, that
Mr. Mayor.
sounds great.
Sounds like something you would say.
I appreciate that. Vice Mayor?
Along those lines, because in our discussion, we talked about the community chest and the festival and Cruel Classic and all the different things, but as much as they have a need, the residents have a need for us to be fiscally responsible and have reserves and strong reserves. So I do think that is a good choice, regretfully, but I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, along those lines, we really, all five of us, we love to give even more to charities and people in need. And we funded Community Chest at the level we have that we think is financially responsible at this juncture. It is unanimous at this juncture. We haven't made a final vote yet, but we did have the preliminary discussions. And yes, if you're watching on TV, not too many people here live, but we've asked a lot of questions, and Catherine, you've given us great information. You have lots of information at your fingertips You've also made yourself available if people have questions, to call you directly or to call, what is the other gentleman's name?
Tyler Court, smile,
Tyler.
Tyler. There
Who's
you go.
Tyler? Hey, Tyler. Or call Tyler with budget questions. So that's a great opportunity for our residents to speak with you or Tyler directly. So you can't get any better than that, because if somebody called me with direct budget questions, I'll have some general ideas, but if you want to know numbers at your fingertips, you got to call these guys. So we really appreciate it. We probably may have a couple more questions. I have one. If we can go back to the debt service on existing bonds, just to share a little bit more of what these bonds are and about when, how high the debt service is now and when the significant drop-off will come.
Sure. Back and kind of looks like a flag. So the piece in red is the GEO bond. This is what is on. These are the items that the people have gone out for during an election and said, yes, I am in support of the city moving forward with these projects. And the financial result is for these items to be funded on their individual tax bills. So these items are prior projects that we have had, from public safety being created to to Safety Town, to fire stations, being be rebuilt and items like that. So that's the GEO bond piece. The revenue bonds are when the city has said, okay, well, let's go ahead and move these projects forward. And this has been the majority of our revenue, the majority of our bonds. So this has been when we have said that, well, we have, I think the last one was in 2015, to be able to move forward in $12 million worth of capital projects. So that was one of the other latter times when we had purchased 4150, then that was also a revenue bond. So these are items that are supported within the millage rate for the city to then pay those obligations, and those are revenue bonds. So typically, yes, you will structure yourselves so that you know that you don't incur more debt in the short term, because in the long term, you're paying off your debt. So you'll start to see in next year, at that point, items start falling off.
Great. I appreciate that. Any further questions? Commissioner Simmons.
Catherine, sorry. Catherine, could you, I guess, let us know over the last 10 years, or if you know the exact years of how many bonds we have, whether, I guess, revenue or GEO, just to kind of give everybody that frame of mind of, why we have, the debt service we have?
We have one fund, and it's a debt service fund. And the way we have it visualized is you can see every year that we have different series of debts that we have. I'm happy to forward that over to you all to make sure you have that and make it available to the public as well.
Sounds
so
good.
That's something that we can certainly circulate to make sure you have.
Sounds good. And if we were less than AAA, about how many extra million would it cost per year to service?
I don't know, because that is up to the rating agencies.
Gotcha.
Sometimes they want to, their overall view is they want to make sure that you can meet your debt obligations. So if you can pay for a higher level, then as long as you're meeting to pay, you have a plan to pay for it, then you're good. So I don't think it is for us necessarily, oh, we can have 20 million, 100 million. I think it's just as long as we can pay for it, then that's what they're after.
Yeah, my question is more along the lines of what interest do we save by having the interest rates that we do because of our credit rating?
Well, as a city and a AAA bond rating city, yes, absolutely. We are capturing the lowest interest rate, so you are capturing the most the most resources to be putting into actual work versus having a higher interest rate and paying on that interest rate. So having a AAA bond rating definitely saves us money.
Sounds good. My last question goes to the departmental budget changes, the negative 14.8% public works.
Yes.
Was there a shift in a position?
Yes, so that is with the stormwater fund,
Gotcha.
then that division, part of it will be paid out of the stormwater fund.
Okay. Any other questions from the dais? All right, seeing none, any further to present, Catherine?
Yes, I do have a couple more that I will
Got it.
breeze through. At this point, we will talk about some of the initiatives, and for you all, for the public, we have posted our proposed business plan. This is on our website for residents to see. This will capture a lot of the initiatives that we are working on. For today, we'll just kind of go through a brief summary. For our 5 strategic goal areas, we have 4 slides because
Perfect.
2 goals are on 1 slide. I will note, other than the one U.S. Conference of Mayors that we just settled on, the only other item that we have changed from meeting 2 weeks ago is on the Visioning Summit to redirect those funds to the census outreach. And at that point, if we need to reach out to and do more on the census, then we have the resources to do it. So I just kind of wanted to make note of that. Second goal area of the city investing in today and the future. You can see some of those projects that we've talked about. And the downtown becoming vibrant and growing local economy. Those are some of the areas that we will be concentrating on in the 2020 budget. Last but not least is the premier community in South Florida, some of those projects as well. Now, we generally look at, when we're adding to staff, let's kind of look at what we currently have and then what we're adding to. So pre-recession levels, then this is what that is captured in the first column. And then you can see us building ourselves back. Now, knowing pre-recession levels, as I said, the total taxable assessed value we just recovered from. So if you kind of look from where we were then to where we are now, that's where you can kind of start to see some of those adjustments. Now, to highlight the 6 adds to staff in the 2020 budget, there are 3 firefighter paramedics. It is split between the general fund and the fire fund. We are looking to convert a part-time to full-time American Heart Association training coordinator, and this will also be revenue offset in the fire fund and EMS in general fund. For the civil engineer, that is actually going to be out of the water and sewer fund, and similarly for that, for us having an on-site civil engineer, that's not something that we're going to have to pay other and outside agency to be able to do. So we'll be able to do that within the water and sewer fund, which is very capital heavy, and that's where you have that. Last but not least is the community involvement officer. It's a part-time to full-time conversion in the police department. So those are the 6 new positions in the 2020 budget. Are there any questions on general fund?
So with the body-worn cameras, you've indicated just under $500,000 will come from forfeiture funds.
Correct.
That already exist.
Correct.
And the 185 will come from future funds.
185 will come from within the department's budget. This is an add into their budget to be able to have the maintenance contract.
Okay. Anybody else? Great.
Okay, so fire assessment, you can look at the local cities with full fire service and see where we sit. And some of the fire fund highlights we have discussed prior. However, you can see, I'm just going to go down to the bottom, you can see that we are increasing a debt service or adding a debt service for the fire fund to be able to have the Fire Station 64 replaced, as well as moving forward in the future with a fire academy expansion and some of the other project as well, as you can see below. Solid waste is something that I believe we had talked about, especially at the last commission meeting, going from 960 to from 260 to 290. You can see the various assessments. Also, I will say that this is not easy to be able to compare with one another because the service levels are so different within cities. So I really am not addressing the different service levels within the solid waste on that slide. However, if you just want to look at what the bottom line is, then that is what it is. I mentioned the water and sewer fund. Just the pink area is what we're talking about. Many a times we receive questions in the budget office for, let's say, NSID, when they have an increase, then that is not you. That is not your commission that is impacting that, or some of the other water districts. This is only the area in pink, which services about 65,000 residents. We also have the tree trust fund that we're able to utilize to put more resources into the median improvements. And here is a slide on the status of reserves. I still owe you what the reserve history looks like from before with Wilma, which we will be giving you. What we look at is continuing to be able to meet our stabilization fund requirement of 17%. Computer replacement plan is making sure that we keep up with that plan. We also, not mentioning on this slide, is a vehicle replacement plan that we keep up with. Our facilities reserve is just making sure that if we ever need to repair a AC or we have to have a new AC replacement, then we have funds to be able to go to. Parks replacement, that is a newer fund that we are now starting to keep up with. Within our turf fields, this number will be going up because that is one of the items that we will be needing to cover. And the capital projects are, we know that we have projects that are still outstanding. If we ever need to move forward on something instead of go out for debt, this is one of the options that we have for ourselves. The unassigned category is at the very end of the year. We have a surplus, and this is where some of that money may go after all the other requirements have been met. So we have financial policies that dictate to us how much funds how much of the funds need to be going toward this, and this. So if any thereafter, then it would go in that category. Okay.
Questions?
Yes. The
ahead.
computer replacement plan, does that include the programming software and all that?
Not software,
And the-
just hard cost of buying the actual computer system.
Not the subscriptions and,
That's all in IT. Right.
All right.
The very end of the presentation is how much of your tax bill goes to the city of Coral Springs. Then you will see 30% of your tax bill goes to Coral Springs. So if you look at the main component of your tax bill, then that goes to the school board. Another large area of 28% goes to the county. So again, only when you receive your tax bill, only 30% typically goes to the city of Coral Springs. That is the number one question we do have to explain out. If you pick up your home and move it to another place, this is how much more or less you will be paying for it. What is the impact of the average single-family home? Then, for this year, the increase per month is $19.70. For the year, it's $236. So at this point, we are recommending to continue to keep the proposed millage rate the same at 5.8732. State law requires a 4-1 vote to keep the millage rate exactly the same. Any millage rate above rollback rate is going to be advertised as a proposed tax increase. So by you keeping the same millage rate is still advertised. Unfortunately, just want to make sure that you all are aware. And this is where we are today. Next time I'll be in front of you, I believe we'll be at the first budget hearing on September 12th. Any questions?
Did a great job, and we thank your entire team for all your work.
I appreciate you saying thank you. Thank you to them, and thank you to staff as well, all staff. Thank you.
Great. Right, may I entertain a motion?
So we're setting a motion.
We have it for item A to approve that once you approve the remainder, Mayor.
But we're moving to approve the business plan at this juncture, no?
No, that's item A to do that.
Gotcha.
This is just a presentation, and we're going to go
Gotcha.
through all the resolutions. And once those are approved, then-
Okay,
Yep,
you got it.
thank you. You want to keep some suspense, you know.
Got it. So now we're on to 2019-036. Is that correct?
2019-034, item number 3.
034, number 3.
Yep, thank you.
Gotcha.
And that's a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of the stormwater collection program in the City of Coral Springs, Florida, providing for purpose and definitions, providing for legislative determinations, establishing the estimated rate for the stormwater collection program assessment for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2019, directing the preparation of an assessment roll, authorizing a public hearing and directing the provision of notice thereof, providing for an effective date. It's a request to approve the public hearing. If approved, the public hearing will be held on September 12, 2019, here in Commission Chambers, beginning at 5:15 p.m.
Moved by Commissioner Vignola,
Second.
second by Commissioner Simmons. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, carries unanimously. Next is number 4.
This is item, Resolution 2019-036, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of residential solid waste collection services and facilities and programs in the City of Coral Springs, Florida, providing for purpose and definitions, providing for legislative determinations, establishing the estimated rate for the solid waste collection services assessment for the calendar year beginning January 1st, 2020, directing the preparation of an assessment roll, authorizing a public hearing and directing the provision of notice thereof, providing for an effective date. Request to approve this item, and it sets the public hearing also on September 12th, 2019, in Commission Chambers, beginning at 5:15 PM.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, moved by Commissioner Simmons, seconded by Vice Mayor Carter. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carries unanimously. Next is number 5.
That's Resolution 2019-35, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the provision of fire services and facilities and programs in the city, providing for purpose and definitions, providing for legislative determinations, establishing the estimated rate for the fire services assessment for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2019, directing the preparation of an assessment roll, authorizing a public hearing, and directing the provision of notice thereof, providing an effective date. Request to approve this resolution, which will set the public hearing for September 12, 2019, in Commission Chambers, beginning at 5:15 PM.
Moved,
Second.
second. Any discussion? You have a question, Deborah? Second by Commissioner Simmons, moved by Commissioner Vignola. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, carries unanimously. Next is number 6.
That's Resolution 2019-37, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of Coral Springs, Florida, relating to the assessment of cost incurred by the city to correct public health, safety, and welfare violations on certain real properties in accordance with Section 184.4 of the city's Land Development Code, determining that certain real property has been specially benefited by the city's abatement of public health, safety, and welfare violations thereon, directing the preparation of preliminary assessment roll, authorizing a public hearing, and directing the provision of notice in connection therewith, providing for conflict, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. Request to approve this resolution, set public hearing on September 12, 2019, in Commission Chambers, beginning at 5:15 PM.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Got it, Deborah? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Next is number 7, Truth and Millage Act requirements and proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 budget schedule.
And this is a request to do several things under Chapter 200 of state law. We have to establish the rollback operating millage rate at 5.6004 mils. Establish the proposed operating millage rate of 5.8732 mils, which is 0 mils or 0% more than the current rate of 5.8732. Establish the voter-approved debt millage rate of $0.2534, which is 4.4% less than the current rate of $0.2652. Establish the required tentative budget public hearing on Thursday, September 12, 2019, at 5:15 PM in these chambers. Establish the required final budget hearing on Wednesday, September 18, 2019, at 6:30 PM in these chambers. And authorize the appropriate legal ads to be placed on or about September 2nd, 2019, and September 16th, 2019, addressing the final budget hearing. So this is your large truth and millage, and as was explained, we're keeping the same millage rate if that is what the commission so chooses. At this point, realistically, you cannot go higher than that millage rate you approved today. There's a way to do it, but it's not realistic. You could always potentially go lower, but that would be the height, the ceiling. So we would look for a motion to do all of those items under item 7.
Move to approve.
All right, it's moved by Commissioner Vignola, seconded by Vice Mayor Carter. Any discussion or questions? So when we had this presented to us before, we looked at what the rollback rate would be, and the shortage for us would be in the millions initially and tens of millions down the road. Now, we've listened to our residents through many different sources directly from the 5 of us. You have 3 of us have campaigned within the last year, so we heard from many residents, and there's certainly a great demand for the services that we provide, especially in public safety. So I believe what we're doing is financially prudent. My aspirations remain the same. The reality is this is what's going to serve our residents in the most and best way, and I'm happy to be a vote for yes for this truth and millage rate. Any further discussion?
We're just voting on all 5 of these, or
We're
just?
voting on all 5.
Okay, just to
and
make, just being clear.
And in accordance with the 2 provisions that Catherine shared with us about the Visioning Summit and moving the other dollars into reserves.
Correct. When you do this motion under Chapter 200, it's one motion, but you have to articulate all the things you're establishing.
Okay. All right, moves to approve.
Oh, it's been moved in section.
Oh, it has been already done. Oh, my gosh.
So
All
we're
right.
still discussing.
Hi, everybody.
No worries, no worries. All right, no further discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next is number 8, fiscal year 2020 business plan. This is a request to adopt the fiscal year 2020 business plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, carries unanimously. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, staff, management, city attorney. We are now adjourned.
That was smooth.